Hey, Western Po Boy Savage of the Derpy Redneck channel. Sorry that the original theme that was used for the intro is no longer being here, but the animation's still here. But yeah, copyright monopoly justifying bollocks fucked me in the ass. Enjoy the show. What is up, guys? Episode 4, Rebuttals, Part 3. At the end of this video, I'm going to let you rehear the whole video so you'll see exactly what I caught, what I criticized, to be sure you heard everything. Since I do this since I catch the shit quickly enough, and rehearse this enough times, I catch it quickly enough to respond to each claim or whatever. My own counterpoints.
About them, and you can move towards realizing them. In fact, even in the United States, where you get no major discussion of these things, there are probably thousands of self-managed enterprises.
There probably are. They also probably might have gotten shit on because of the minimum wage laws and other regulations. When, you know, value in labor and all that's entirely subjective. All you need to do is go to get education and learn basic laboring skills and other things like that as a starting block. That usually gets you hired more easily.
Not huge ones, but lots of them, and they're growing. And they could.
Again, that growing claim. Let's say I have an argument of doubt for that, because of the mass, like the fucking, how many, over 81,000 regulations, or maybe even 100 at this fucking point. But I don't know. It's a lot of shit, a lot of regulations. And then you got redundant regulations on top of that, I'm sure, because it's how these fuckers do this shit. And then you got the stuff, again, minimum wage labor laws. These self-managed enterprises can't hold themselves up like that when you have minimum wage labor laws. The contradictions this man and others like him make, it is such a fucking shock. It is absolutely sad too, because it's an intellectual that I know could be better than this. I know Professor Chomsky can be better than this. I've seen him be better than this. I've heard him be better than this. But this nagging shit just will not leave him, I swear to God. I swear to fucking God. It will not leave him for the life of us all. Or for the life of us.
As I mentioned, they could reach the scale of, say, producing the green technology, high-speed rail and so on, that the country badly needs. It's not a law of nature that we have to import solar technology from China.
Nope. Agreed.
Poor developing country.
Agreed.
Or that we have to get high-speed rail facilities from Spain.
Agreed.
Those aren't laws of nature. Those are political decisions.
Yep.
Socioeconomic and political decisions. They can be made differently.
Yes, it could. And,
if they're made differently enough, we'll be moving towards a, kind of an anarchist type society.
technically it's possible, but you would need the, you'd need to actually, you'd actually have to establish a figure of underground pathology to work in cahoots with certain people of similar mindsets to your favor without letting them know. If they don't catch on. A lot of people won't, because they tend to be oblivious to such things. But if possible, you could technically make these movements possible. It would eventually shrink the state back down to minarchism, so we can keep it held down to the minarchism, so we can keep developing it things more and improving with science to make things cheaper and better as time goes on. Then all it would take is an egoism swoop right through it all. And that would allow us to have the anarchist type society we need. And honestly, with the gravity battery and the 3D solar towers able to draw a hell of a lot more power than the current solar cell technologies, inefficiencies that are fucking horrible. I think if these things are implemented and put into practice by enough companies and private investors who would be interested in trying solar, at least give it one last shot with these technologies available now, and been since 2012 and 2011 and 2012, I believe. I think we have a means of going forward. Plus nuclear fusion by focus fusion. There was a little discussion between a few I did with a few friends about online a few years back, and I said I got two figures. I got two predictions. I said what? Well, actually, I predict two probabilities based on the research that went into these projects. They said what that? Well, the Polywell fuser system by Robert Bossard. How do you say that last name? Fuck my letters again. The Polywell fusion system, which is a hybrid between it's essentially it's a hybrid between the Farnswell fuser, high beta fusion system, magnetic mirror, and biconic cusps. It's a hybrid between all these concepts as a fusion reactor. Well, apparently Jaeyoung Park delivered electric it's a university in Thailand with a discussion of the idea that the world has so underestimated the timetable and impact on practical and economic fusion power will have, that its actual arrival will be highly disruptive. Specifically, Professor Park stated that he expected the final scientific proof of principle for the Polywell technology to be around 2019 to 2020. Expects a first-generation commercial fusion reactor being developed by 2030, within mass production and commercialization of the technology in the 2030s. This is approximately 30 years faster than expected under the first government-driven international thermonuclear energy reactor project. But I told some people, I said, look, your Polywell fuser or the dense plasma focus project of focus fusion, they're your most likely candidates to actually achieve break-even in the near future. They said, you think so? And I said, yeah, probably. And I'll be damned if I didn't get one of them right. I did it as a guessing game for fun with some fellow Tesla fanboys and science nerds, and I'll be fucked if I guessed one of them. Focus fusion in 2015. Although it's a tiny number, it's still a huge step in progress. Focus fusion's dense plasma focus unit actually went 1/4 of a joule past break even. You got technology like this, it'll make it all the easier because all the companies will be able to use this technology to power themselves. And if you wanted to, I can give you a rather controversial invention. I will use it. I will respond to the video soon enough. I'm going to explain it in detail. I'm going to open source the document. I did an early take on it on my DeviantArt page. Well, Derpy Redneck DeviantArt page. But, thing is, I I'll get into that soon enough. But there, I think if we do these renewable and super potent technologies and invest in advancing ultra high temp superconductive ceramic material to make superconductor electric wire, we can replace copper and use it to store water and drink and beverages in again. Use plastic and epoxy composites. Make little holes, little pores in the outer, come down to a certain thickness into the copper, a certain depth into the copper, and so it can't be ripped out for the copper. I think there's a way of doing it, and you can have that as in copper on the inside to store water, purified water, and other things. Or bronze or brass, depending on how you alloy those with certain minerals. You can do that instead of take place. I think when you got these advances ready to come up, I personally think we'll be closer to being ready. All we got to do is fucking make shit underground and eventually bring agorism to shrink back the government back down to the underground movement. Well, but we have to do it where no one would be suspecting. Be a counter-economics movement of most epic proportions. State agents that are tired of it all will eventually give up and join our side, and certain military personnel will be that's willing to get rid of the problems in their system that they're willing to accept. Various people will be willing to basically form mutiny and join us. But we got to be based in multiple places. We have to be scattered. We'd have to be strategic about it. The fact I'm even explaining this should consider me dangerous. And eventually, we can make a movement over time to make it a highly technological anarchist type society. It would not be democratic. It would be individual rights over majority or minority. But if you're going to have majorities and minorities, they need to be equally heard out regardless. That kind of system, which is not democracy, it's something a little better. Because minorities get to be heard too. Because remember, democracy is mob rule. I think a possibility. It's possible, but we take these steps, the fusion, the advances in solar, the high-speed railing, and eventually if we ever make electrokinetic or some type of propulsion that does not rely on rocket fuel, or if it's like the flying machine shit that Tesla wanted to do, wingless, propellerless flying machines. Last year's research, his ideas, maybe they'll come to fruition. I don't know. Maybe they will. When these things do come to fruition and they become technological and economically viable and not as expensive, the disruption could happen. But the thing is, it would be in our favor. We could enact then. Step 1: bring the state back down. Bring prosperity back. Stop wars, unnecessary wars. Fight corruption, political corruption everywhere around the world. Make a private network. Step 2: do not use the internet do not do an internet idea like esoteric. Shh, we're not supposed to know about that. So 3, do this underground. Tip 4, when we strike, and by strike we mean civil disobedience, because we're not a bunch of fucking bloodthirsty Marxists. And resistance is futile. Shrink the gut state back down, make things better, and then eventually let it go for a while until we improve enough to where we won't need it, and we just go splickety-split. Eventually you can become an anarchist type society. That's how I see it would happen. Any predatorial methods would be no better than the leftists that people hate on nowadays, since a right-wing and liberty-oriented pushes have become strong as of recently. No term co-opting, just good old counter-economics. And civil disobedience when things go shit. Even more shit. For the better of us all. But anyway, let's listen to the entire video. Make sure you hear everything I responded to rather quickly and sharply, and kind of infamously in certain spots. On my part, I will admit. Let's go ahead.
Well, first of all, we should bear in mind that we don't have a capitalist system. And no capitalist system has ever survived. It would self-destruct in 5 minutes. So what we have is a kind of state capitalist system, with the state playing a substantial role in American history, a very substantial role in economic development, in production, and research and development, a lot of other bailouts, lots of other devices to keep the private sector viable. So it's a kind of a state capitalist system, like others, but they vary a little on how they do it. So is there an alternative to this? Of course. For example, the alternative that was taken for granted by 19th century workers before it was sort of beaten out of people's heads by massive propaganda. You go back to the early Industrial Revolution, which was right around here, eastern Massachusetts. It was the period probably the freest press ever in the United States. There were lots and lots of newspapers representing different ethnic groups, class, workers, all sorts of people. And there was a lot of participation, direct participation, very lively press, widely read, and so on. And if you look at the working class press, they were expressing the common view of working people, namely that those who work in the mills should own them and run them. Yeah, that's very natural. And as I say, we've come close to that a number of times, terrifying to private owners. They also held that wage labor is basically no different from chattel slavery, except that it's temporary. And that was such a popular idea that it was a position of the Republican Party. Abraham Lincoln espoused it. And it makes sense. I mean, there's nothing holy about wage labor. You are renting yourself, which is not very different from being a slave, except that maybe it'll end sometime. Okay, so those are alternatives. Self-management, democratic control of institutions, whether they're communities or workplaces or any others, alliances among them, federal arrangements. These are all perfectly feasible alternatives. There's no economic or political theory that tells us there's anything wrong with them. They conflict with the structure of existing power systems, and therefore the educational and cultural system tries to drive them out of your minds and make them seem insane or crazy or unthinkable. But there's nothing unthinkable about them, and you can move towards realizing them. In fact, even in the United States, where you get no major discussion of these things, there are probably thousands of self-managed enterprises, not huge ones, but lots of them, and they're growing. And they could, as I mentioned, they could reach the scale of, say, producing the green technology, high-speed rail and so on, that the country badly needs. It's not a law of nature that we have to import solar technology from China. a poor developing country, or that we have to get high-speed rail facilities from Spain. Those aren't laws of nature. Those are political decisions, social, economic, and political decisions. They can be made differently. If they're made differently enough, we'll be moving towards a kind of an anarchist type society.
Now, since you made sure that you guys heard the entire video, and I told you about how that could possibly be, I'm going to tell you a little something. You're not going to beat basic economics. You're not going to make a fucking God bot. AI has only certain algorithm patterns unless it becomes super intelligent. You're taking the biggest gamble in the history of existence at that point, and that's why I would be cautious about AI. If you factor that in, because you literally would have a Terminator or some other type of doom scenario, if possible, but the moment it figures out self-preservation and looks at humanity as a threat to itself, even though there's too many problems ready to happen with AIs. That's why I'm not a fan of technocrats. I'm not too big a fan of theirs at all for that shit. No. You know what's even worse? Jacques Fresco. He was advocating a technocracy communism, essentially. That's what Venus Project was. A technocratic communism. A fucking technocratic communist. He was just saying, but it's not communist. Bullshit! Everything about it is Marxist as fuck. Marx has said, but I will at least give Professor Chomsky credit, even though he's not as much of a futurist and engineer and shit like in science guy. Well, I mean, he is a science guy actually, cognitive science guy. Well, he contributed to the field of science hugely. And he contributed to psychology and made it more scientific, a lot more scientific and shit, and psychoanalysis as well. But the thing is, unlike Jacques Fresco, he didn't plagiarize off of anybody. He's just promoting an idea he thinks actually existed or was being used or actually would work, which called out the contradictions and such already. If you want to know, all you gotta do is find out writings about syndicalism. They only go back at the very earliest, the late 1890s, and then the earliest was the late 1890s and early 1900s by the very same people I mentioned before: Joseph Pierre Proudhon, Blanqui, Lagardelle, Sam Mainwaring. Hope I said that right, or Mainwaring, whatever. Still, these guys. And Proudhon from France was a career politician. Go figure. Fucking of course. But he was also the founder of mutualists. But majority of these same principles would be used to found anarcho-syndicalism as well. But we'll get into a few things the classic liberal economist Ludwig von Mises had to say. Signing off. We'll see you in the final episode. Episode 5, Rebuttals, Part 4.